In a new age world filled with delusions and wish fulfillment by morons in need of attention, renowned experiencers of high strangeness and podcasters Jeffrey Ritzman and Jeremy Vaeni received invitations to a tropical paradise getaway called Paratopia. Little did they know, it was the same type of new age spiritual retreat they've been avoiding all their lives.
Don't be shy.
You can record people in stone. That is high strangeness.
Come on, you can shake it.
Yeah. If I were an undead monster trapped on Earth, I'd get stoned too.
Anything goes at Paratopia. And welcome.
You're listening to Paratopia on UPRN 105.3 New Orleans. New Orleans. Or not. We have no proof of that. Paratopia. We tried to do this episode last week, but I screwed things up. The audio got screwed up. We weren't sure if we could even fill an hour, but we did. So now the magic is, can we even remember the questions that filled an hour? We're going to try. Our guest is the one, the only Rob Beck, who you know as Rob Father over at Eerie Radio. Just so happens he's a geologist.
Something like that.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, yeah. Good. Excellent.
My educational background's in geology. I've worked as a geologist, and my current work's in a field that's pretty well related.
Okay, and you're the third host on Eerie?
Third, fourth, somewhere in there, yeah.
Somewhere in there. Okay.
We've got the big ones like DK and Fizz, and then we've got Oleon, who's currently on hiatus, and then yours truly. So and then a couple other band of unmentionables.
Let's pretend that last week's conversation never happened. And
past this. In fact, never play that again.
Yeah. And so it'll be rehashed for us. Tell us how you got into this and about the ghostly happenings of your past that I don't know anything about because last week never happened.
Because you've never heard it before.
Right.
Yes. This is like a bad episode of Star Trek. Okay.
You say that like there's a good one, but go ahead.
There's a few. I mean, didn't you see the action adventure Star Trek now? We have the new, younger, hipper.
Yes.
Everybody's 20 on the bridge Star Trek.
That's right.
Yeah. Okay, anyway. How I got into the paranormal. Well, I didn't exactly choose to get into it. It's like a lot of people, the more I'm exposed to it, I ask people that very question, how'd you get into this? What interested you in it? Most people say the same thing. They had an experience or multiple experiences when they were a kid, which actually led me on a whole different tangent. I actually started looking into why children, why do kids always seem to see more than adults do? So that's an entirely different line of thinking. But it was just a kind of odd experience for me. I lived in what could probably euphemistically be called the haunted house when I was a kid, and strange things happened there. And
what strange things?
Let's see.
Tell us a story.
Probably the strangest thing. Well, I'll give you the basics, which is what I gave you and did not give you before. It was an older house built post World War II, 1950s or late 40s, early 50s. Had a finished basement, and I was maybe 10, and was very excited because one of the rooms that finished in the basement had been turned into a bedroom, and my folks gave me that room, and I was, I had a little baby brother, so my thinking was as far away from him as I could be was great. I loved, having that, have this nice big room to myself, could put out all my toys and everything and have fun. And so it wasn't, people were like, well, it's kind of a basement thing when you be creeped out by a basement. I wasn't creeped out by a basement. I thought it was like an underground fort.
Yeah.
So, I was 9 for Christ's sakes. So then started getting bad nightmares down there, and then whenever I'd be just playing with my toys, whatever, doing whatever, I would always feel like something was watching me from the area of the furnace room, and just always kind of got that creepy feeling. Then started waking up in the middle of the night and felt with me so much so that I would run up the stairs and slam the door behind me because I always felt like something was following me right up the stairs, and then spend the rest of the evening sleeping on the couch in the living room because I just couldn't take being in there. And then got to the point where there's actual physical manifestation of activity in the basement. The things started, the ironing board started moving on its own. So that kind of convinced me not to want to stay downstairs as much after that. But that was probably the first. I mean, there's undoubtedly little things from before that, but that's my most memorable, earliest experience.
When the ironing board moved, what was it? Folded up? Was it in position?
Well, it was up against. Well, usually kept it up against a wall, And another thing, my cousin had lived there in that house before I did, and her, my aunt and uncle, and she claimed, just as a side note, but she had said she heard voices down in the basement when she'd be down there folding laundry when she lived there. Even my voice, and I wasn't anywhere near that house, so that was a good one. But what happened when with the ironing board was I got woke up in the middle of the night. I hear something just banging up against a wall. I don't know what's going on. So I turn my light on. Nothing in my room. Go out in the hallway, looks down to the laundry room, and I see the ironing board opening and closing on its own, kind of just hanging in the air. I mean, it was banging up against the wall, opening, closing, banging up against the wall. And I ran my little butt upstairs and didn't go back down for a couple of days. So.
And so from there you became a geologist.
Actually, a geologist I met when I was 10 was the reason I became a geologist. But he made the field sound pretty cool. So, and he was a pretty cool guy himself. So.
Well, wait, how did you end up on? You ended up on Eerie because you guys are friends, right?
Yeah, old friends actually. Known DK Ben for about 11 years now. Known Seth for a few years less than that. So we had discussions in this area before, kind of how we were all interested in it. And at the time they started Eerie, I was involved in other issues just with family and didn't have the time to be involved with it. And then kind of just came back, and about a year and a half later, about a little under a year ago, I had the time to devote to it a little bit, and it was certainly an interesting project. And I kind of talked with DK about it, and next thing I know, I'm on the show.
Here we are. Right, and so certainly in your travels and in your interviews, you must have stumbled upon, in the ghost world, is it limestone that's in the neighborhood of ghostly activity? And then everyone in Ghost Hunters goes, oh, right, limestone. That's why there's
No, that's what I'm hearing. I don't know why limestone got picked to be the mystery stone.
Well, what are the properties of limestone that would, for instance, record dead people?
I don't really have much of an idea.
But you're a geologist, Rob.
Yeah, I guess I fell asleep during that sedimentology and stratigraphy class. When we talked about the undead channeling through limestone. But I can tell you the basics of limestone. I hear that, and I'm actually surprised it isn't stones that have more quartz in them, like granite or certain kind of sandstones. That would be, because quartz is what we talked about and didn't talk about before. Quartz is more in line with what you would think of as an energy transmitter, possible information storage device, because we use quartz crystals for information transfer now and storage to some degree. We've certainly played with it. So kind of surprised that doesn't usually get the duty as the paranormal mineral. So certainly used in New Agey stores. You can't go into a New Age store where they're not selling different kinds of quartz.
Yeah.
But you don't go into a New Age store and see much limestone, do you?
Well, do you think it goes back to Egypt that they use limestone?
I don't know. A lot of places use limestone. It wasn't just the pyramids. I mean, there's.
But I mean, if you want your esoteric connection to why limestone over quartz, well, in the rock, paper, scissors of New Age, I think the pyramids.
Limestone's just easier to work if you. And it's going to take a little bit to get through this, but there's a lot of reasons why limestone is kind of an oddball choice. And if somebody could nail down for me, I'd actually like to hear why they think limestone is such a paranormal rock, but it's so variable. It's a chemical sedimentary rock as opposed to a terrigenous. It's not made from grains of anything else. The material that makes limestone is precipitated out of the water, out of seawater, and forms a calcium mud, and then that calcium mud forms into calcium carbonate, and the calcium carbonate crystals get compressed. You get limestone. And they can be real fine grain crystals. They can be big coarse crystals. The fine grain crystals are the ones that we use for most building stone, like especially in Midwest here. Mm-hmm. Pretty much everything in the Midwest is built with Indiana Salem limestone, or faced with it. There's very few new structures that are built freestanding masonry structures. Most are just veneered with stone. I know downtown Indianapolis, there's one. There's an old cathedral that's made of masonry freestanding limestone. Mm-hmm. Everything else is just veneer, and it's easy to work, and the weather's really good, and that's probably why it works really well. It's use proper English, and that's undoubtedly why you see it in a lot of ancient buildings, because it was easy to cut and shape and move. The coarse grain stuff is really not good for much more than gravel. You have to bust because it fractures so easily. Mm-hmm. You hit a cleavage plane in the quartz or in the crystal, and it fractures along that plane, and it doesn't cut the way you want it. It cuts the way that the crystal plane wants it to cut. So that's incredibly variable what you find in the ground. You can't look at one state and go, well, everything in this state's fine grained. There's a mix of it in Indiana even.
That's what I was going to ask, is when they say, limestone in the area. Well, how rare is limestone in the area?
Well, limestone is pretty common. I'd also say there's, again, depends on what part of the country you're in. The area it formed in has to have been a warm, shallow sea or uplifted from that, like a mountain range. It was one of the things I was going to mention also is limestone. It can be chemically different. It's not always calcium carbonate. Sometimes iron or other minerals can substitute for the calcium ion in carbonate, in the calcium carbonate molecule. The calcium will pop out and get replaced by a heavier ferromagnesium mineral. And in that case, you're dealing with a stone that's got a little bit of juice to it. It's got a little bit of iron to it. So, and there have been studies actually done, and I did look this up a little bit to kind of get some ideas on it, but they're very uncommon studies, the electromagnetic properties of dolostones, which are stones that have ferromagnesium replacement of calcium. So there may be something to its ability to mess with electromagnetic energy, but that's only a certain kind of limestone. It's not everywhere. It's not very common. As far as the commonality of limestone, well, you can find it in the Midwest pretty easily. Find in some mountain ranges here and there. Just depends. A lot of times the big problem is, and when they're like, well, I hear the paranormal geologist theory that, it's limestone is imprinting information, or it's transferring information from some paranormal entity. I'm like, well, what about in the cases where it's several hundred feet underground? Like pretty much in all the Midwest, with the exception of some southern areas where the glaciers didn't cover. You got to cut maybe 100 feet, 200 feet of sediment on top of that, maybe more. I mean, how far is this electromagnetic energy supposed to penetrate to get to the stone, that this stone can still be effective as some kind of paranormal conduit that deep down? I mean, if you're trying to put a scientific edge on this, you can't just pick one variable, run with it, and say, that's going to be our explanation. That's going to tell us everything we need to know.
Right. Okay, so you'd said quartz, of course, has some portable properties. But we don't really use it that much, right? So, I mean, do we know what the boundaries are? Do we know what it can't do?
What it can't do? No.
Yeah.
I don't know that we know what anything can't do from a scientific perspective. I mean, you can say things aren't as conductive. You can establish basic physical properties, but I can say it's not harder than diamond. There's other stones that are harder than quartz. It fractures really easily. It doesn't have quartz. If you find quartz rock, it doesn't have a crystalline structure per se. It doesn't grow the same way that other minerals grow crystals. There are certain kinds of minerals like quartz, which is silicon dioxide, that grow like glass, because, well, that's what glass is, silicon dioxide. And if you fracture quartz, you get conchoidal fracture, just like you get a shatter pattern on glass. You get the same kind of pattern on quartz. So it's kind of odd in that respect.
Is there any combination of things that you can see? Like, I'm thinking about Let's see. What? Go ahead. Go ahead,
I just
Jeff.
had a Mr. Cotter flashback.
What about, I mean, even with limestone and quartz and granite, what would be an added element would be like an underground spring or running water?
Oh, there it is.
What kind of additional interesting thing would that do or not do? Because that's one of the things I remember from years ago was the crop circles were in areas where there was heavy limestone and underground water, and that meant something to them. I mean, obviously, but I'm curious if there's anything added to that.
Well, I dare say there's a significant percentage of the population in this country and others that still thinks you can go anywhere in the world and drill, and you're looking for an underground river to sink your well in. And underground rivers are actually a very uncommon feature, and they're only associated that one kind of topography that actually is limestone associated. But in most places, water just moves through pore spaces and whatever materials beneath your feet. And it mostly, the stuff that most drinking water wells comes in sand and gravel aquifers. So it's moving very slowly through these massive Brita filters that sit underneath us, more than it's moving through these little conduits and there's even some well drillers to this day who will tell you, I got into a water vein when I'm drilling for a well, because they don't even know their own, they inherited the rig from their dad. They don't know what they're looking for. As far as underground rivers, they're pretty well confined to certain parts of the country or certain parts of the world that have something called karst topography. And karst topography is limestone that is generally pretty weak stone, that it's either interbedded with a lot of shales or it's very coarse crystalline and fractured really badly, because then water gets into it, and cold water has by nature carbonic acid. CO2 mixes with water, dissolves in water, you get a little carbonic acid. That's the alleged death blow to the coral reef, this increased acidity in the oceanic water, whatever. Anyway, in colder water, you get a little carbonic acid, and that slowly, very, very slowly eats away at the limestone, because it is calcium carbonate. It's a base. The acid, reacts with it and wears it away. And you get bigger and bigger fractures, and eventually you get river systems underground. Okay? And again, these are only in very specific places. Like in Indiana, there's an area called the Mitchell Plain that's in south central part of the state. That's the only place there's karst topography of any significance that still functions. There's a relic that's buried, but it doesn't function. Kentucky's full of it. The American Southwest, Carlsbad, Lechuga Caverns, those are karst features. Areas like that. Other than that, no underground rivers.
And what about in those particular areas? What is paranormal activity like in those particular areas? I mean, you're into the ghost thing a lot more than I am. So, is there a map that can be looked at to say, there seems to be more concentrated? I don't think anybody's ever done a study like that. Yeah. But I don't know of any more ghost stories out of South Central Indiana than I know of any of any of the rest of the state. There's ghost stories everywhere. And Kentucky, well, that's just paranormally odd anyway. I can say that because family's from there originally. Now, is there anything with the running water and the stone that could generate EMF that would then kind of, to sensitive people would kind of tick them off?
There might be that may be, and you remember pseudoscience is always touched off by a hint of regular science, and there might actually be something to that. Just that we wouldn't know how to apply it or how it affected people. Well, I mean, you're running significant amounts of water through rock conduits, especially if everything can, just about every rock in the world can have magnetite in it, because magnetite gets in everything, it seems like. And magnetite's just it's just another iron derivative. It's Fe3O4. So you can have old lodestone, what do you want to call it, mixed in anywhere. You can have, like I said, you can have some conversion over to dolostone, so you can have some ferromagnesian materials in the limestone. And I suppose a charge could get built up somewhere. Odd as that sounds, I don't think anybody's ever, like I said, I think there's a couple of studies that are working to try to figure out if there's anything to that, but I haven't seen anything where anybody's actually said, yeah, there is, other than what we've heard as a speculation from the paranormal crowd.
Now, you guys in Indiana, back when you had the Kokomo boom and all of that, I think I told you before that just about every video that got sent to me from that and everybody I talked to, it seemed to me like a lot of what we were looking at was like plasma discharge from the previous or, post or pre earthquake or tremors, whatever you want to call them. Did you guys happen to notice any significant upswing in paranormal events during that time besides the perceived, perhaps wrongly perceived UFOs that were floating around?
Well, I wouldn't speak for every paranormal researcher in the state, but I didn't see anything extra.
You didn't see anything? Okay.
No, I mean, there's people like Wanda Lou Willis and stuff who are folklorists, but they're also tied into everybody in the state who could tell you if there was an uptick or not just by, all you'd have to do is say, hey, you remember back a couple months, was there a lot of report? Yeah or no? They'd be able to tell you. As myself, I don't recall anything extra. I remember the earthquake. It woke me up. I remember hearing we were getting some earth lights afterwards, which is fairly common after earthquakes. It's not unheard of. Don't know. There's been speculation tying it into the activity, and then of course you have the Kokomo hum, which we mentioned before,
right?
Which has always been kind of an oddball little thing about Kokomo that's had people baffled for years. But I don't remember anything extra coming out of that. No.
And can you explain for the audience what makes earth lights happen and what their kind of characteristics are, so that people, I get a lot of people wrote me after, saying what I did on ATS and a couple. I think I went on Eerie and said the same thing when I was on with was it Deb Cobble I was on with? I said that it was, likely to me to be some sort of earth lights. And I got a lot of emails about, well, what does that mean? What are earth lights and how do they happen? And what does that have to do with an earthquake? So maybe you could educate us on that.
Well, I don't claim to be an expert on that one, but what I do know is that when you get significant movement of any fault, it's entirely possible that you can get disturbances in the electromagnetic field of the Earth. And you get discharges. You can get discharges. The same way with the thunderstorm. A thunderstorm is an atmospheric disturbance, with the Earth, and in those cases the atmosphere is the cause of the electrical disturbance. In the case of an earthquake, the lithosphere, the Earth's crust, is the cause of the electrical disturbance. You get friction of two big pieces of rock moving up against each other. It is entirely possible you can get electrical discharge, especially static electric discharges, and they just kind of pop off, and you get these nice little light phenomena. And those are the earth lights I'm familiar with. If there's others beyond that, I defer to your listeners.
Are they usually amber colored, or do they vary in color?
I always heard a multicolor.
Okay.
Never any specific color that's been attributed to it. There's also gas discharges in certain cases. If it happens to be in an area where you have any kind of natural gases stored in the earth, and a fault system lets loose, you get kind of an earth belch or worse. And you get a little gas release, and maybe it ignites. The same as swamp gases. Swamp gases have a tendency to ignite. That's one of our famous UFO UFO explanations.
Right.
But Indiana does have the Trenton limestone fields, which were, as they were described, they were some of the first commercially tapped fields in the United States back in late 19th century, and they were described as the Saudi Arabia of that period. I mean, at that time, Ohio and northeast Indiana had more oil coming out of them than comes out of Saudi Arabia now. So we were just pumping that sucker for everything it was worth.
Right.
And when you have big petroleum deposits, you usually have big natural gas deposits, and there's still natural gas down there. A lot of people still heat their homes off 100-year-old wells. Natural gas up. So you get in that field kind of, the Trenton trends over most of Indiana. So you could get, I would say it's possible you get a natural gas discharge if you got a fault in the right place and it fractured the Trenton a little bit there. Although that formation is pretty well collapsed, so anything's possible. There's still a lot of gas trapped down there.
Right. Jer?
Yes. Well, what I was going to say before was, talking about places like Stonehenge or in upstate New York, you've got, Balanced Rock, which is this huge rock. as you would imagine, balanced on
like
a tripod of smaller rocks, and nobody knows.
It looks like a tripod.
Yeah, nobody knows how. The old thinking on it was that it was sort of bowled over here from the last ice age, but Phil and Brogno has so made the case that can't be true that they've had to change their history of it, and it's indeed changed on the plaque next to it.
So they're saying it's not a glacial erratic anymore?
Well, yeah, they're saying it might be, or it might be this other thing, because, I mean, it is so clearly, you look at it, I've seen it, I've been up there, and you look at it, and it's so clearly placed on these smaller rocks that I don't know how they would have ever come to that conclusion, but, his research has also shown that these pre-Celtic, or what he's calling pre-Celtic, sort of mausoleums, or little, I don't know,
you mean like the Mystery Hill stuff and all that? America's Stonehenge?
They sort of jut out in, all around that area, but in precise lines from this thing. Mm-hmm. And it's where the Hudson Valley UFO sightings took place, and people see, druid-type aliens around there and all kinds of creepy stuff.
It's funny, they didn't look Jewish.
And I'm just wondering, is there anything that you can think of that why would there be a giant rock at the epicenter of this? And I remember when we were up there, Phil had said, some people will get a feeling off this rock. I didn't feel anything. My mother, of all people, who's the biggest skeptic I know, absolutely felt something, or claimed to, So,
well,
why that is? I mean, why would that be? What is it about a rock being placed in geometrically aligned with other built monuments that would, even if you say like there's some sort of earth energy, I mean, do you have any clue how that would work?
What kind of rock is it? Do we know?
What's that?
What kind of rock is it? Do we know?
I don't know. That would require research, and I didn't do any of that.
Yeah, whenever somebody says, "What's this rock doing?" I'm like, "What kind is it?" Yeah, I don't know then. Of course, I don't claim to know much about. I mean, I know I can give you the historical bit on ley lines, and I can give you the historical bit on how electromagnetic energy is supposed to course all around the Earth. And
yeah, give us that.
People are supposed to have been able to harness it, but besides that, as far as the scientific basis, that's a field most scientists have scoffed at. And I think my own feeling is the jury's out on it. I won't scoff at something like that until somebody can give me a little more concrete evidence that, that's all bullshit,
Right.
But until they can give me that, I'm still going to give it a little. At least I'm going to listen. I'm going to listen to people who talk about it, because that kind of stuff fascinates me. Why would you balance a giant rock onto a bunch of little rocks and then orient what people used to call pioneer root cellars all over the place around it, certain ways so they can catch rays of the sun on certain days and things of that nature? Is it? I don't necessarily think a lot of those cases, and we're getting kind of into the ancient civilization stuff, which I'm fascinated by. But I don't necessarily think that every one of those was just so that they would know when to plant crops. I have a good idea of that. I guess a farmer now, when you plant the crops, he doesn't say, well, I wait until I go to the local Stonehenge and I check to see where the sun is, and then I know. He waits, and he doesn't even necessarily check the calendar as much. He waits until the weather seems right, and then he deals with his crops. So I don't necessarily buy that agriculture was the sole reason for all these sorts of things, all these sorts of alignments. And I got to wonder, did they know something we didn't about the way energy runs over the planet? I mean, we do have this big turbine dynamo in the middle of the planet that the solid core and the liquid surrounding it, for creating our nice magnetic field. That your guess is mine.
Well, here's what I find on the what Jeremy was bringing up with Phil, that he had. It said that a precession proton magnetometer was used to measure natural magnetic fields and induced artificial magnetic fields around these chambers. Okay. Measurements were in gammas, not Gauss. Normal background magnetism is usually between 54,800 gammas and 55,000 gammas. And someone there who is a geologist, Bruce Cornett, describes gamma fluctuation close to the double stone chamber, 247 K. It doesn't say exactly what they are, but as far as the makeup of the rock itself, I'm not seeing anything so far on that. But I am seeing that there's a magnetic anomaly at Balancing Rock. Apparently that is pretty severe that they've documented here. You know, it says here on just about every stone chamber that they've done apparently magnetometer readings on, they get anomaly that is essentially the lines of the magnetic fields are sweeping around these things and then becoming centrally located over top of them, or exactly where they are. So, I mean, it doesn't say what they are, but I would think that if you've got significant electromagnetic stuff going on that, especially if you're talking about something that's like a mausoleum type thing, you're talking about it almost like what ghost hunters call fear cage, which is, a high EMF frequencies that can make you sick to your stomach, disorient, exactly. Rashes in severe cases, headaches, that sort of thing. So,
looking behind.
I mean, and if there's a lot of weird things in that area of Pine Bush, New York, that also I've always been curious to ask a geologist about this, because knowing that it is a weird area, one of the things that they report up there is when you're standing on, just say, one particular mountain peak, and you look across at all of the beautiful mountains that are there, people see extremely bright flashes of light that seem to be coming out of mountains there, that don't necessarily coincide with a house, a truck, a road. These are extremely wooded areas that all of a sudden just seem to be emitting light of some sort. When I went up there years ago, I saw literally a huge golden orb that was hanging around the top of a mountain, and we drove up to it, and we saw it the whole way up there. Once we drove around the corkscrew of the mountain road, it was gone. We get back down to the bottom, it's there again. So we're seeing that same thing that Ted Phillips talks about with Marley Woods, where he sees these orbs, these great balls of light that seem to be visible from one vantage point only. Is there something in a rock or in the earth that could cause such an illusion that might only be in a directional vantage point to be visible? Is there anything like that?
I couldn't say for sure.
I mean, that's just, to me, is confounding. It's almost like the water on the road illusion, in the heat.
Right, but that's actually something I did want to touch on a little bit. When you started talking about that got me thinking about something that we mentioned previously, and I'm glad you brought it back up again, because I think it's worth discussing, and I'd really be interested. These are the kind of things I always like to find listeners who have different opinions and see what they have to say. There's places all over the world like that have oddball magnetic field fluctuations, electromagnetic field fluctuations. And we see that in artificially generated fields. I mean, we see it with unshielded fields. We see it with fields that are affected by the weather. When you get a ionization effect in the atmosphere.
Right.
And I mean, you can get that. A storm creates that by itself. It creates ionization channels. That's where you get lightning, all kind of fun stuff. But at the same time, there's people linking ionization of the air to EVPs. The air ionizes right before you get an EVP. So isn't that unusual? You get these oddball spots around the world where electromagnetic energy just kind of goes and does its own thing, and things perspective-wise look different. There's lots of high strangeness around them. Like you said, the Hudson Valley UFO. DK's reminding me of somebody that we had, and he's a real interesting soul himself, but you probably heard of Jeff Woolwine.
Yeah.
Jeff sees flying butt diving tarantulas, and he sees all kinds of interesting stuff. But he always talks about the stuff he sees being around certain mountains. He sees lots of things coming in and out of mountains. Now, on the slightly less super caffeinated end of the scale, there's people like Mac Tonys who talk about cryptoterrestrialism, things coming out of the earth. And so UFOs in the traditional sense of the word, an unidentified object coming out of the earth and flying around and buzzing off, as opposed to things coming in from the atmosphere.
Right.
So again, in these certain areas, is there some kind of, I mean, take like the quantum many worlds theory, where you're dealing with because quantum realities can, things can be in the same place at once now. We've managed to prove that. The spin of an electron can be one way or another, and it completely changes things based on which way it spins. Different realities, different dimensions. Are these spots the thin spots? Where I think didn't one of you say something about wouldn't one of you like it to a curtain rubbing against something or kind of, I can't remember if it was you guys or if it was somebody else who was saying that. That whole two realities rubbing against each other at certain spots,
right?
Creating magnetic anomalies. And are these just the spots where, and perhaps there's entities that have figured those things out a lot better than we have, and they're making use of them. And it's totally on left field with that, but that's part of the paranormal, isn't it?
Sure.
As far as science goes, I don't think science is there yet. I don't think we've quite figured out the wherefores and the whys of those spots. So that's the whole where you got to have an open mind. You can be skeptical. You can say there could be nothing to it at all. But these anomalies do seem to at least cause something visual and that we can see. So why not look into it? See why it does that.
Sure. Yeah.
Let me ask you what the hell that noise is.
Not me. Not it.
Sorry.
Jeff, are you having a fire?
No.
Cooking,
okay.
Jeff?
No, I'm not. I'm sorry.
That's Jeff's actually a robot. That's he needs oil monitor.
Oil can.
Paratopians know that already.
I see.
So, just for a sort of mundane, non-geological ghost question, EVPs, are they recorded on just digital recorders, or can you record them on tape as well?
I've heard both. I've heard analog and digital.
Huh. Do you believe them? Do you think that they represent the undead?
I honestly don't know. I don't know what they are. I haven't made that leap yet. And I don't think anybody else really has a legitimate answer. How could you? Because you get ones that seem to be playing on a loop, same thing over and over again, and you seem to get ones that answer you. So what's that mean? Does that mean there's two different kinds? And again, there is definitely a measurable phenomena. That much we've been able to figure out. Okay, if you're putting the pizza rolls in the microwave, it's 1:50, I think.
The goddamn thing is off. How is it beeping? This is ridiculous.
Take the battery out, and if it still beeps, then run.
Yeah, then I would. That's kind of like the Teddy Ruxpin. You take the batteries out, and it still talks to you. That's what you got to get rid of the
God,
or the
please.
Furby. God forbid you have a frickin' Furby in the room, and it sounds off on you. I mean, those things are like little. Even if you're the biggest atheist in the world, you get around the Furbies, you're thinking demonic, especially when they start talking to one another.
I've actually got one of these.
Ridiculous.
But where the hell were we?
EVPs.
Oh, EVPs.
Yeah. Well, let me throw this at you. I had read a little bit from a book on dark matter last week. The basic gist of it was that you got neutrinos that, of course, are smaller than atoms and basically comprise dark matter. They may.
You got a whole new school of thinkers out there who are pointing to dark matter as the ether of the 1800s.
Well, this is the thing. If you've got this dark matter, you've got neutrinos. This is just me and my stupid, non-scientist mind imagining things. And maybe you know more about this than I do and can clear this up or not. If you have neutrinos, if you have this dark matter that it's, in the book says may or may not interact with, us, may or may not be interact with telescopes, for instance. That may or may not really sort of got stuck in my mind, and then goes on to say, so if this is all true, then basically we're like, a pocket of light in this larger, vast universe that moves through us and all around us and all
Seeming without effect, yeah.
Well, could there be beings that are of this, that are made of neutrinos? Could there be an intelligence that is of neutrinos? And because what is it about this UFO stuff and this ghost stuff? It's all that may or may not interact with us. UFOs can sort of just disappear.
Well, that's all of science. All of science is may or may not. Hell, we've even found we thought were fundamental laws that now we're having to look back at and go, yeah, not so much. We just won't publicize that too much.
Well, is it too much of imagination, or is it too much not knowing what the hell I'm talking about to say, well, gee, maybe it's possible that there are beings that are made of neutrinos as opposed to atoms and molecules and cells?
A hypothesis, same as any other one. I mean, it's just one that you happen to not be able to prove right now. I would say it's beyond the scope of our easy reckoning to determine what could or could not be floating around in the ether, as it were. If there's beings living out in the, that are at least in this plane of existence represented by, the energy that's inside dark matter, how are we going to detect that? How are we going to know? It's like fish realizing, hey, there's something other than water, for the first time. There seems to be something not water. We can't breathe it. We can't detect it. But, because we're sitting here in the water, running it through our gills, and that's how we live. But there's something up there. We don't know what it is. Actually, we're pretty much at that stage.
I don't know. I would think it would be more like fish discovering that, hey, there is water. Hey, we are swimming in something, and that something is made up of other things.
Man, we're pissing in this.
I don't know. It just seems like you're right. We wouldn't be able to detect them unless they wanted to be detected, and on the other hand, they would be able to interact with us at will.
If and it comes down to it, if an entity like that, if an entity that lives in anything, that lives in any kind of alternate dimension setup, has figured out a way to utilize the geomagnetic anomalies to get to and from here on Earth or anywhere, then they're kind of a step ahead of us on that one. Mm-hmm. But it would seem, that kind of fits a lot of things. That whole ability to pierce the veil and move from one dimension to the other, sort of, and this is my favorite little phrase I mentioned before. I'm glad I get to say it again. The whole idea of a paranormal unified field theory, the idea that maybe there's some relation to ghosts and ETs and all other fun sorts of stuff. Maybe they all have some basic connection. We're just witnessing things that are piercing the veil, coming from somewhere else.
Do you have anything
we describe it based on what our individual perception of it is.
Do you have any boundaries with that stuff? Is there anything that you would definitely say, like Bigfoot is not of that? Or...
Well, you could say Bigfoot's just a critter from a different dimension. Once you get into the idea of dimensional slippage, I think you could tie a lot of stuff into that. Mm-hmm. Now, is there legitimacy to that? I mean, does that make me the grand kook? Oh, who knows? I mean, I could be the grand poobah kooks here that come up with that one, but it's just a hypothesis I'm throwing out there. I don't consider it any more legitimate or illegitimate than any other ones that are out there.
You really? You don't consider it more legitimate?
Well, the Faygo drinking Bigfoots, I don't know on that one.
Well, no, I just mean in terms of...
Although that was interesting. I'm still waiting to hear, because Walter Cronkite, Fizz, didn't bother to ask what flavor, which I think is the question that was on everybody's mind when I heard that one. Your listeners have no freaking idea where we're going. We had an interview at a convention locally that lady had said she had invisible little Bigfoots in her house, and she offered them Faygo, and they took it. And I said, what flavor? And he had not answered the question.
Is it grape the best? I mean, come on, really.
Grape is pretty much hard to beat.
Yeah.
It really is.
And this gets to our sort of favorite question to ask people. Do you have as many crazies in the UFO world as we do in the ghost world as we do in the UFO world?
Yeah, we're all a little crazy. This is the old Norman baseline. We all go a little crazy sometimes. I think there's people that I've certainly seen all kinds. I think you can say just about anything in a given paranormal field, and somebody else is going to think you're crazy, you're a fucking loon. But there's 6 billion people on the planet. Somebody's going to think you're nuts, and usually majority. Because it's, we don't exactly see. Although paranormal topics are certainly becoming more and more accepted, mainstream, they're still not. They're still the cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs factor. But yeah, there's certain people that just seem irrational, or they seem just their way of presenting themselves is so off the deep end, so absolute. They're almost zealots. And a zealotry, whether you're in religion or you're in paranormal, or just happen to be a fan of some entertainment type or program or band or whatever, zealotry is potentially dangerous and usually makes you look like a frickin' loon, even to people who might believe the same thing you do.
But here's what I'm wondering, if this is the difference between UFOs and ghost research. Those guys, or other field, I should say cryptozoological stuff as well.
Yeah.
Those guys who faked the Bigfoot in their freezer, they will not be on
bags.
They will not be on the talking circuit anytime soon. Whereas in ufology, you can fake UFOs and get caught and still be a guest speaker and an expert.
Where?
Oh, well, at the X conference, I think.
Really?
Well, I mean, there's even a conference run
by the
Billy Meyer people. It's like
they say that they have Billy Meyer hanging around, and he didn't even show how he faked some of his shots. I could have swore I remember seeing a television special years and years ago where it showed him holding one on a string and photographing it.
Yeah, you're not the first to say that. I have not seen that either, but I've had a bunch of people write and ask me about that. It probably was related to when I think it was Wendell Stevens had a model made, and they took it out there and they photographed it to see how close they could get to doing one of his shots. And my answer to that is, if you don't know the technique of forced perspective, it's going to look like ass, and there's no way to make it look good. But when you know a little something about how cameras work and how to do that, then you could get some pretty good things out of it. But I mean, I think I would probably think that in the ghost research community, you probably have the same sort of opportunistic people who really don't seem to be into this for anything but a TV show. And I think I brought up to you last time was the SPI people,
the spy girls. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, hey, I like hot chicks as much as anybody else, but
don't we all? Yeah.
Come on, these guys are like prepackaged for a TV show. I mean, and that seems.
I'll just say this: we had a masquerade ball at the on the Saturday night of the convention,
right?
And it was just a fun thing, dress up whatever.
Sure,
and some people dressed very interesting, like. The spy girl showed up dressed in their regular clothes, and everybody's kind of like, well, they figure this would be kind of a custom-made event for them,
right?
Because it was dress up whatever kind of character you want to, and somebody made the comment maybe their lingerie was for later. I won't say who that was, but when they were asked, one of us asked, why didn't you dress up? They said we can't, we're not allowed to. I'm like, what the hell kind of, you're not allowed to, so is this an entertainment thing you're doing, or is it an actual investigation thing? Because we talked to two of them, and although I admittedly forgot the name of one of them, we talked to two of them, and I mean, they seem like nice enough girls.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
But it's just at the same time, they got all, I don't know. And the other paranormal groups there were ostracizing them because they thought, well, you guys are just in this for the show, and the guy who says as much as, he's like, well, I was looking for people to model my merchandise. Why did you have merchandise?
Right.
Everybody can have merchandise. Sure. This is kind of how, you got to pay the bills. I get that.
You got to fund things. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. You got to fund your guilty hobby.
Right.
But I mean, everybody does. We all do it. But which are you in it more for shilling the merchandise, or are you in it for actually figuring out what the hell's going on? And I think when you produce a group like the Spy Girls, generally everybody's going to think you're shilling.
Well, yeah, when you can hire them for your event.
Sex sells.
I mean, I don't.
I know some girls out of Vegas you can hire, or out of Reno that you can hire as well. And
I'm sure we'd much rather have that than the Spy Girls. But that guy more or less reminds me of the what do you call it? The Ghost Adventures on Travel Channel.
Oh, he is such a douchebag.
Thank you.
Yeah,
I mean,
come on. I dare you to do something. Then they do something. He's like, ah! He's like a freaking pussy.
Exactly. I mean, that kind of stuff seems like ready-made for TV type junk. And
the production assistants are throwing things at him. He's like, oh, it's a poltergeist. No, it's Jeff over there throwing shit at you.
So I mean, so clearly there's the same type of thing there that exists in ufology, which is people like Greer who are always after a dollar, and other people who are out to hawk anything that they can of a case long after it's been laid to bed and it's got 3 inches of dust on it. So.
And yeah, the UFO field, the cryptid field, everything's full of that. Every field's full of that. It's human nature. It's human nature to want to make a buck. Whether you're in a capitalist society, a socialist society, communist society, it doesn't matter. You want to get a little piece of something good. And if you think you can dupe some people who you feel are gullible enough to believe what you have to say, then you're going to do it. And certainly, in 60 years worth of ufology, it's happened a lot. It's in a couple hundred years of significant ghost study. Look at the 1800s. Look at the Blavatskys of the business. How many of them were shilling and scamming people of money? It's not like this is a new phenomenon, which is a shame.
It's funny. Just on another similar tangent, I was at the New York Book Expo with Bill Burns on Friday, and I was looking around and trying to grab as many free UFO books as I could. And there's a new Stan Romanek book, where who I don't know if you're familiar with him, but he's basically, from what I can tell, a giant fraud. And what's really funny is, like, his claim to fame, the thing that makes him like, oh, we want to believe you, is that he's just country dumb. So he couldn't possibly be making this stuff up because he's not smart enough. But he's smart enough to write a book.
Yeah, country means stupid. Yeah.
Like, if he's like, if I take that story at face value, why would I ever buy a book written by someone who's that dumb? They just couldn't.
Country doesn't mean stupid. Most of your meth millionaires live in rural areas. I'll just say that. Always, never, and this is a coastal prejudice, but never disregard or discount somebody just because they talk a little slower than you do.
Well, but that's his whole thing. That's the whole reason that he.
I'm sure he probably does. I'm sure that he takes advantage of people like that. I'm sure he takes advantage of people who think they're urban sophisticates, who are looking at this bumpkin, and think, oh well, he can't possibly be making this up. He's a good old country boy. They're simple folk. They're people of the land, the common clay. Morons. So I don't know much about him, but
he's got a video of an alien.
Don't they all? I can go on YouTube and show you 30 videos of aliens.
Did we miss anything with the rocks? I would be remiss if we did.
I don't think we did. The only other issue I remember mentioning was there was one other interesting part about rocks, and actually limestones were kind of the opposite of what people would claim they are. Now, one of the things I did in one job, one of many that I've had. You remember I mentioned the Trenton Limestone formation, the natural gas formation. And people still use those wells to heat their homes rather than pay, $200 a month for the gas heat. That's a pretty sweet deal when you think about it. But occasionally these wells they get water on them because, groundwater seeps in, you got to pump it out. Not from underground rivers, but from aquifers. And when we pump them out, sometimes we want to map the formations to find out where the best producing formation is located. One trick you can use to do that is a gamma ray probe, most commonly. And these things load up on the back of a truck. You run it's a probe that looks like you're a little bit bigger than a radio mic, a good quality radio mic, and you drop it down on the end of an electrical line, and it goes down in and it measures background radiation of the rock. And certain kind of rock has more gamma ray emittance than others. Limestone, typically clean limestones like the Trenton, which we talked about, have next to no gamma ray emittance at all. They don't have any material in there that's decaying. No radioactive material is in that rock decaying, creating gamma ray emissions, or very, very little is. So your meter basically drops off to nothing, and it's one of those things. It's like a seismograph. It graphs as it goes along. As the probe moves down, it graphs it on a separate sheet of paper. Then you get other formations, typically formations like shales, that have a lot of radioactive elements in them. And this is background radiation. This is when you hear people talk about, well, the background radiation, this is what they're talking about. Certain rocks emit radiation. Our bodies are well adapted to it. Every animal's body is. This is just this is the environment we live in. But you go to these shale formations, and they just peg the meter. They're pumping out all kinds of gamma ray emissions. because they've got little bits of uranium in them, radium, other radioactive minerals, just kind of hanging out. They've eroded out of some formation upstream or up gradient if you're in glacier country. So just another little oddball thing to throw in the mix there. Whether that has anything to do with kind of paranormal, making it easier for paranormal to make use of a certain type of rock substance, I don't know.
Very good. Jeff?
I think that's it for me.
That's all we got.
That's all we got.
Well, we have conquered yet another hour, so...
All right.
Thank you for that, sir.
Yeah, thank Rob.
No problem. I didn't think we had it. I was like, we talk about paranormal rocks for an hour. I racked my brain on that one, but we did it.
I think it dispels a lot of myths that people, hear about all the time on TV. That, well, I'll tell you why it's haunted. There's a lot of limestone and quartz here. I mean, there's really not much to that, really.
No, and I think that's the same thing with anything. It's don't ever accept any snake oil that's given to you.
Right.
Do the research. I mean, we have the internet. It's one of the greatest research and one of the greatest charlatan producing objects in tandem that we've ever had. So no reason anybody should be duped into a catch-all explanation for anything. We don't have any. There's no such thing. There's hardly for anything is there a catch-all explanation. Usually there's a lot of factors for one, and maybe in some small way, maybe in one part of the country or countries, it has something to do with it. But we haven't figured that out yet. And to just have somebody dismissively say it, cheapens your investigation, no matter what you're looking into. No matter looking at UFOs or ghosts or what.
Well, the next time you have the ghost hunters on your show, be sure to tell them.
I'll be sure to do that.
Rob Beck, ladies and gentlemen, Rob Beck.
Guys, appreciate you having me on.
Yep.
Thank you, sir.
Take care.
Hi, my name's Greg Bishop, and you're listening to Paratopia, where I just got asked questions that I never get asked, and got to talk about things that I never get to talk about.
Eerie Radio, the endeavor for esoteric research and investigation into the enigmatic. Eerie Radio is a weekly podcast that features interviews with the world's leading paranormal researchers. Download episodes of Eerie Radio from your favorite podcatcher or directly from the show website at www.eerieradio.com. Eerie Radio. Listen, learn, laugh.
I'm drinking I hope people have not... I've been trying to sneak this as quietly as possible during the entire interview, but I'm drinking a Slurpee from 7-Eleven, and it's called Terminator Apocalypse. And the reason I got it is that it's not a flavor. It's just called Terminator Apocalypse. And I thought, wow, that's something new. Not even having a flavor anymore. Just, here's a movie tie-in. Go drink this movie tie-in. And it turns out it tastes an awful lot like Sunny Delight. So I was pleasantly surprised.
I thought it would taste like metal and apocalypse.
The sweet taste of death is the sweet taste of Sunny D. We had to redo this episode because of sound difficulties, and we ended up having sound difficulties in this episode anyway.
Are you serious? Well, yeah, he was cutting them out a little bit.
Yeah, the Skype was a little weird.
Yeah.
But nothing we couldn't fix in post.
Right.
So, geology.
Yeah, rocks.
We done with that or what?
Rocks, man. Well, I mean, I think probably the best part that came out of the show is the whole thing about the limestone, the quartz, the connections to, paranormal activity and that kind of thing. I think that's sounds to me like a big misnomer in all of this. Yeah. And I'm glad that we got someone who obviously knows his stuff to kind of clarify those issues for us, because like I said, this is just about every paranormal show you watch. Well, this house is built on granite, and there you are. Oh, everybody gets it. Well, what the hell does that mean? And obviously it doesn't mean much.
Yeah, I think that all hit home for me, like a cold fish slapping me upside the head.
Tasty.
Yeah, I must be writing again because I'm coming up with some brilliant analogies. or is that a metaphor? I don't know. I'm not a good writer. In any event, the thing that hit home for me was when he said, well, how far underground is this stone to have any effect on anything? It's like, yeah, there's something I would never have even thought to ask. You know, it's a high limestone content area. Yeah, but if that limestone is buried, what does that mean?
Yeah. I don't think even if it's let's see, strapped to your skull, I don't know that it would have a big effect. I mean, if that's the case, then we need to start marketing those limestone helmets we came up with a while back.
We haven't done that yet?
No. Well,
Cafe Press covered that.
Cafe Press, yeah. I think, if nothing else, you're looking at the EMF fields from certain rocks and running water and that type of thing. Maybe being some kind of factor in there, judging that EMF frequencies can attribute all sorts of things to people who are sensitive to those. Like I was saying, even going so far as skin rashes and hallucinations and phantom smells and that sort of thing. And I think that kind of all goes back to, for me, when I think of that, I think of the Dr. Persinger and his magnet helmet and all that kind of stuff, and the way he can stimulate different parts of the brain to, get that feeling of presence in the room or feeling of floating or out of body or whatever. And still, when I hear that stuff, even if it is electromagnetic field related, again, kind of ties in tandem with the psychedelic thing is what people are seeing within a high EMF field, something that, is there, but hitherto unrealized by normal consciousness. Are they actually activating parts of the brain to see these things, or is it just a byproduct of some kind of interference with the brain?
Right.
That's the big question for me.
Yeah, and then I get to thinking about balanced rock and all of its alignments and all of that, and I, going into one of those mausoleum or root cellar or cave type things, whatever it ends up being. Certainly not a natural cave. I mean, this is clearly made out of
absolutely
cut stones. The two times I went up there, the very same one of all of them, and I went into a bunch of them, just gave me an awful stuffy headache. Like, it was just really, really bad. And I find it odd that animals don't go in them, like you would think that they would be the hideouts of animals. Some of these are buried in the woods, some are just along the side of the road hidden.
Yeah.
And they don't. And I find that all interesting. But then I think, what if the giant boulder is magnetized, and like you said, maybe there's some sort of, there is, right? There's some sort of magnetic anomaly in that area. So that really, the only thing that's of interest there is this magnetism, There's nothing about the composition of the rock itself other than whatever magnetic, deposits are in it or properties are in it.
Right.
I guess what I'm saying is, to me, that would kill away anything about just pure limestone having an effect, or pure granite, or pure anything. It would have to be something else in it that is magnetic, that might create a magnetic anomaly or create some sort of field or strengthened field. But other than that, not much to go on there.
No, I mean, we should say that the area where those structures are is weird beyond those things. I mean, like you said, we've got the Hudson Valley UFO thing that happened up there. We have a lady who's since passed away named Ellen Crystal, who wrote a book called Silent Invasion, which was a damn interesting read way back when I read it, but I've heard less than flattering things about her work and, the verifiable aspects of what she wrote. And also, I think I mentioned Bruce Cornett in the show tonight when we were talking about that area and the magnetic anomalies that I think he was responsible for mapping. I actually got into it with him years and years ago. I think back when I was on AOL, when he was posting photographs and films of what were obviously, I mean, blatantly obviously, commercial jetliners that were on their way into some airport around there or near there. And he was claiming that these were triangle-shaped alien craft of some sort, or maybe not alien, but at least highly exotic. And he was on sightings some years ago talking about aliens in the ground there and that sort of thing. So I don't think he's... I didn't find his argument to be particularly compelling to me. I pointed out to him the fuselage, the delta-shaped wing, the cockpit windows.
Who is this?
I mean, Dr. Bruce Coronet is his name. And yeah, I don't really... I
was going to say, Phil Imbrogno is the go-to guy as far as Hudson Valley UFOs go, and he worked with Hynek, so for whatever that's worth,
Right. Well, I think Bruce Cornett
then again, so did Paula Harris. Right?
Well, yeah, right. That's true. But I think, I don't know, I think some of the people up there who have been writing and talking about this stuff publicly for a while, I don't know that I am so ready and willing to listen to what they have to say about it, because some of it is really out there to me. But it is a weird place. I mean, very weird.
There is a reservoir there that attracts, I think we've talked about this in the show before, it attracts Satanists and witches, Wicca people, mystics, meditators, all sorts of types for some reason go to this one sort of hotspot location.
Yeah.
So, it's a weird place all around. It's, I believe, if I'm remembering correctly, the satanic ritual abuse capital of America.
Great.
Yeah. So,
I mean, it's definitely a weird place, and I do believe weird things happen there. But I think when so many weird things happen in one particular concentrated area like that, you can get a lot of people who are reading way too much into what they see, that most of it has a pretty, explainable answer. So some people jump the gun, some people knuckle down and become more critical of what they're looking at. But it's a weird place, and I'd like to. I wouldn't. I often said I wouldn't go back to that place, but I think nowadays I'd be interested in going up and staying in a nearby town or something. I don't think I'd want to stay right in Pine Bush, New York, but it's definitely an interesting place. Weird place, I'll tell you that.
Well, my friend Melissa Reed has moved up there, or up around there, so.
Oh, great.
There you go. We can stay with her.
Yeah, we'll stay with her. Hear that, Melissa? We're on our way.
What else we got?
I don't know. I had spaghetti for dinner tonight.
How was that? Delicious?
Yeah.
Good.
Had really bad sinus headache all week, and here's one thing that I haven't even told you, so here it is. I think I kind of remember what the blonde-haired girl was telling me in the
mushroom trip.
Yeah, it's not like I can quote it verbatim or anything, but something kind of came to me the other morning when I woke up that, and I don't know how exactly to explain it other than to say that the conversation, whatever she was saying, was that I wasn't supposed to be there, that I wasn't ready. And I said, well, what do I do to be ready? Why am I the only one who's not ready to be in that state or in that place or wherever the fuck we were? And she said, oh, no, you don't understand. It's not just you. It's all of you, meaning everybody, I guess. And that there would be a point in time where this wouldn't have to be accessed by the method that was used. It would be available readily when you're ready and when you're more evolved than you are now. You have to take these shortcuts, and it's kind of like, the way I took it, I think, was more or less like watching a movie that's out of your intellectual range and trying to skip to the end before you even know what you're looking at.
Right.
That kind of feeling.
Uh-huh.
And that's really all I remember about it. I mean, and I'm pretty confident that that's what the gist of the whole thing was. But it was happening. It seemed like the speed of that was just very fast. So it was hard to really understand everything that was being said. In fact, I know I missed a great deal of it because it was a lot of talking going on. But that was the one thing that I picked out that I feel confident enough to say that's what I remember about it. And there was no timetable to that, and other than it won't be in my lifetime that this realization of what is around us and what exists in different places would be able to be perceived by us, if that makes any sense. That it has more to do with our chemistry and current makeup than it did with anything else. I don't know. That's what I got from it, or that's how I verbalize it, I guess. So anyway, that was curious, I thought. Did
you ask her anything, or were you just listening?
I honestly don't remember, other than saying, other than having the feeling of kind of a little bit of like put off by saying you're not ready to be here, and that's why all of this seems so weird and a little frightening to you. That kind of thing, and I'm like, well, why am I not ready? I did this thing that I was so afraid of doing, and I've done it now, and now I'm here, and now you're saying I'm not ready, and I'm here, aren't I? And I had that kind of attitude issue. And she's, no, you don't understand what I'm saying. None of you are. None of you. Meaning, I guess everyone is not at a place that the reason that the experience seems so bizarre and so at times, I guess, frightening is because we're not, we're not physically evolved enough, we're mentally evolved enough to be able to understand what this is, and therefore our perception of it is messed up anyway. And I keep going back to that, like we're jumping ahead before we're supposed to jump ahead. Right. And the one thing that did pop up was I said, well, how will we know when we're ready for that? And all she said was, they will lead you. Huh. And again, it's just more incoherent babble that I just
did you make an association at the time when she said that with anything?
Yeah.
Aliens?
No. The very the plants. Huh. The compounds, so in other words, it was kind of, again, it was that contradictory type of thing where you shouldn't be doing this, you shouldn't be here because you're not ready for this yet, but yet they'll lead you. The plants will lead you, the other things will lead humanity, to this greater awareness as time goes on, and I got the feeling it wasn't like next year or 2012, or it was on the order of, many, many years. Right. that this will, so who knows how the whole psychedelic thing is going to evolve from now to 100 years from now. If we make it that far. Who knows how that's going to evolve? And who knows?
Did she give you an over-under on the species actually making it that far?
I know. No. No, I mean, again, it's just, I'm attaching a lot of what I think to this, but, I mean, really, it was just, that's how it feels to me, and I feel obligated to kind of just out with it, because that's, how I do things. And it's just more or less, it's when I first remembered that kind of stuff, I thought, well, that's just ridiculous. How can it be ready? And who is they? And what does that mean? And, and I just took it as more just disjointed stuff that I couldn't put my finger on what it is. But the more I think about it, I'm like, is that possibly what was meant by that? And is that possibly the way that I'm supposed to think about this stuff? I do remember I do remember at some point, and I don't know if it was during that, I don't know what you'd even call that, that closed eye period, or whether it was during another one that I said, I won't be back. And I felt kind of a like, oh, well, good. I mean, it's just ridiculous, but that's really about it. And to be honest with you, the headache that I've had this week, I haven't really devoted too much time to thought lately, but that's what I take away from that little snippet of that thing. And I'll think about it some more, but as I said, I have no desire to experiment that way again. I think I got essentially what I came into it for, and that is, is it similar to the hyper reality feeling, that feeling of disconnect but yet high attunement and that kind of, yes, it definitely has those characteristics about it. And I'm sure that, had 5 grams been ingested, I'm quite sure that there would have been all manner of weird shit that happened, but I'm not really interested in going any further with that. I've got enough weird shit as it is. So there's.
Guess it's up to me to do the 5 grams.
Yeah. Well, peer pressure and all that. You know what they said in those high school drug movies. So that's pretty much as far as I'm willing to go, and I don't really see the point in any further. And I think I'm pretty much put that in a post today on the message board, or yesterday, about what I got is what I came for. End of story. And in addition to that, somebody mentioned something about, well, if you're not up for a spiritual journey, number one, I don't feel any compulsion to do that. And it goes back to something that I think you said when I spoke to you about way back when I first talked to you about, like, should we try this, and how fearful I was of it. And you said, well, why are you so afraid? How much different or how much worse can it be than anything that you've already seen or had in a normal state? And I'd say that's pretty true. I mean, in comparison to a full-blown experience with this stuff, meaning the UFO stuff, psychedelics for me at that point seemed kind of pale in comparison. But I'm sure that at effective doses, I'm sure it is pretty transforming in certain ways. But I got enough on my plate, so that's pretty much where I stand with it.
I have nothing on my plate. I will be ingesting all 5 grams. That's what will be on my plate. Mushroom.
Well. You're insane.
Mushroom pizza.
I'm telling you, you're insane.
Can I eat it with a pizza? Do I just have to eat mushrooms?
I think you just put it on pizza and,
awesome.
Yeah,
it'll
be all right.
A long time ago.
Except then when you puke, it's like all the cheese and stuff.
Well, that's why you puke, isn't it?
Eat it twice.
I think that was one step too far, but yes.
Uncharted waters here on Paratopia. Vomit.
Yeah, vomit
Subject
humor. That's what we've come down to.
Yeah. Well,
Translates well to radio, by the way.
But no, that Rob Beck, good guy.
Yes, the Rob father.
Yes. And
the father of Rob.
Wish him the best of luck and all the guys on Eerie with the show.
Going up against our stellar show. Is that what you mean? Good luck, guys. Good luck.
Well, I symbolically throw down the gauntlet. No, of course not. No, I think that was a good episode. Despite the fact that we had to do it twice, I think the second time was probably even better.
Yeah, I agree, actually. I
think we got a little more in depth to some things that he wanted to touch upon, which were, again, important to the whole paranormal, geological, environmental issues that, like I said, apparently it's not very, that whole contention of the environment and the rocks around having some sort of effect is not real viable. So, more community service here on Paratopia.
That's right. Although we still, you know what, never mind.
What?
No, I was going to make a bad joke, and now I've thought better. I've thought better. I think better of myself and this show, Jeff.
Well, that's
to make
good
bad
because
jokes.
Well, because there's no room for comedy in the UFO podcast. Right. So there you have it, folks. Yet another episode of hilarity and information.
Not in that order.
Right.
Hey, Brandon D. It's me, Dr. Stephen Greer. And I listened to you read Goodnight Moon on Paratopia a couple of nights, and I was just wondering if maybe you could read it again. This time to me.
In the great green room, there was a telephone, and a red balloon, and a picture of the cow jumping over the moon.
Oh.
And there were 3 little bears sitting on chairs, and 2 little kittens, and a pair of mittens,
Meow.
and a little toy house, and a young mouse, and a comb and a brush, and a bowl full of mush, and a quiet old lady who was whispering hush.
Oh, bitch.
Good night, room. Good night, moon.
Brandon, hearing about that small room with the mice and the bowl full of mush reminds me of my own childhood. A lot of abuse. It was, worse than Mommy Dearest. But you know what I'm going to do? Since you were so kind to have read that to me, I'm going to give you a 15% off discount coupon on your next visit to the woods with me to shine flashlights at UFOs and stuff. Okay? So, thanks again, Brandon.